Alright y'all, I am making a cherry chip cake today and I want to show you exactly how to do it with a luscious cherry cake, cherry filling with some chocolate ganache, and you'll have a perfect cake for any event. Okay, obviously for a cherry chip cake you need cherries. So I have some maraschino cherries here. If you have a food processor, this would be the perfect time to use it just to chop these up really fine, but I am just gonna do it the old-fashioned way with a knife and cutting board. So I'm just going to pour these out and then chop them up super fine. Now that my cherries are chopped, I just have a little tray here with a paper towel on it, and I am going to scoop my cherries up, spreading them out, and then I can get my second paper towel, laying it on top, and then a second pan, and just pressing down to get all the extra juice out. And then you have chopped up cherries, and then I just have a bowl of a little bit of flour, about a tablespoon, that I am going to scrape these up and put them into. Now that my cherries are in my bowl, I am just gonna mix this up, tossing these in the flour. I just want a good coat of flour all over these cherries so that they don't all sink to the bottom when I put them into my batter. This kind of gives the batter something to stick to. And then I set these aside to wait. Next, I just have my flour, and then I have my baking powder and salt. I'm going to pour this in and just give it a good whisk, getting that salt and baking powder all mixed in. And then we'll set this aside and move on to my butter. So I'm going to put my butter in my stand mixer along with my sugar and my Jell-O mix. And then turn this on medium speed until it's nice and fluffy. And now that you can see my mixer, I am just going to scrape this down a few times and then turn it back up to medium-high speed until it's the right consistency. Now that my butter mixture is nice and pale and fluffy, I will scrape this down one more time, getting everything at the bottom and off my spatula. And then I will turn this back on medium-low speed this time and add my eggs in 3 parts. So I'm just going to pour them in, let them mix, pour them in, let them mix, and then put my last part in. Now that my eggs are mixed in, I'm going to scrape everything down and then turn this up to medium-high speed and whip this for about 2 to 3 minutes. Now that this is nice and mixed, I am just gonna go ahead and mix together my buttermilk and cherry juice in a bowl. And I'll just whisk this together. And then I will add my vanilla, mixing this just a little bit. And now it is time for our flour and buttermilk. So I am going to take my flour, pouring some in and mixing this. I want to mix this until it is just combined, and then go back and add half of my buttermilk and cherry mixture, mixing this again until just combined. And then my flour, the rest of my buttermilk, and ending with flour. Now that my batter is all mixed up, I am going to get every last drop off of my paddle, not going to waste any. Then I will do one final scrape down of my bowl, making sure all the flour and everything at the bottom got nice and incorporated. And then finally, I will take those cherries that I already chopped up and tossed in some flour, and I will just fold these in. Now that this is all mixed up, I have gone ahead and sprayed my 8-inch pans and I will just pour this evenly between the 3. And at this point, some people weigh how much they're putting in each pan to make sure they're even. I eyeball it and hope for the best, but if you want to weigh it, that is a-okay. Now I am just going to spread this out to the sides and up the sides of my pan just a little bit. And doing this, I am just ensuring that my cake rises on the outside before the middle so that I don't have a huge dome to cut off when I'm done. And then I will go ahead and get these into my 325-degree preheated oven for about 35 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. Now to move on to our buttercream, I am going to start with all of my butter in the stand mixer, just mixing until it's really nice and pale and fluffy. My butter is nice and whipped, and now I'm just going to start putting in most of my sugar. As always, I always measure out a little bit more than I might need, but might not even use all that the recipe calls for. Really just depends on texture and taste. So I'm just going to start adding this in slowly, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that my sugar is all mixed in, I have some heavy cream that I'm going to whip in on medium-high speed for just about 2 to 3 minutes. I am just going to give my bowl one more really good scrape down the sides, and then I am going to add my cherry juice. But I want to be very careful with this. Depending on your weather where you live, this might go a long way. So I'm going to do about 1/4 of it and see what the consistency of my buttercream is, and then I will add more depending on what it needs. Now that my buttercream is all mixed, I am going to set this aside and work on my chocolate ganache. Because I added that heavy cream, I now have a nice, fluffy, and really smooth buttercream that when I mix with my hands, I can push out all those extra air bubbles for just a nice, smooth, silky buttercream. To move on to my chocolate ganache, I have shown y'all how to make this many of times, but I'm going to take my heavy cream and stick it in the microwave to get it nice and hot, and then pour it over my chocolate to melt, and then we'll mix it up for a nice smooth chocolate ganache. I am just putting my cream over my chocolate and making sure it's completely covered, and then I just put a pan on top to kind of steam inside. So I'll let this sit for like 3 to 5 minutes and then mix it up. Now that I have mixed my cream into my chocolate, I have a nice thick chocolate ganache that I can use to fill my cake. Now that everything is made, I have my buttercream, my chocolate ganache, and my friend Mrs. Smuckers made my cherry preserve for me today, but I went ahead and made my chocolate ganache and buttercream with you guys, so now we can move on to decorating. Now that my cakes are out of the oven and have been all chilled completely through, now I am just going to pipe a small little dam around the outside of my cake. Then I can go back with a scoop of my chocolate ganache. And then I'll just take my offset spatula, spread this out all along the inside. And then I will go back with some of my cherry jam and do the same thing. So I'll just put little dollops. And then I can put my next layer on top. Now I'm just going to stick this in the refrigerator to chill before we put on our final coat. My cake is out of the refrigerator and it is nice and chilled. So now I'm just going to put a good final layer of buttercream all around my cake. And if you end up making this cake, you will be able to smell the amazing cherry buttercream so well right now. It smells so good. Cannot wait for them to be able to enjoy this delicious cake. Now I am just going back with some of my buttercream and putting some extra buttercream where it's not meeting my bench scraper exactly. So these little bubbles right here, I can just fill in so that when I go back, it will actually reach my bench scraper. Now that I have my pattern mostly in my cake, I am going to take this out to the freezer to get nice and solid so that when I go back, I can get it nice and perfectly smooth and straight. Okay, my cake just came out of the freezer, which means I can go along my sides, just shaving off this buttercream. Now that I have all of that off, I can go back in with a little bit of buttercream, smoothing this out, and then touching up some of the spots that I see need some smoothing out. I'll just add some buttercream here and there. And then I can take my bench scraper, going along pattern, nice and smooth. Now that I have it mostly smooth, I still have a little bit of texture in it, but I'm just gonna go back with my finger, and the heat from my finger is going to melt the butter just a little bit so that if I have any spots, it just smooths it out. Now I am just taking in my top one last time so that I have that nice straight edge, and then we can move on to our final decoration. And there's nothing like a cherry chip cake without a few cherries on top. So I have gone ahead and laid out some maraschino cherries on a paper towel, and they've just been sitting out for a few hours just to kind of dry off. But I am going to take my cherries and simply line the edge of my cake. And there you have it, a cherry chip cake. I wish I could cut this open and show you how delicious it looks on the inside, but this is off to a wedding tomorrow, so it has to stay in one piece. But if you enjoyed learning how to make this delicious recipe, make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell so we can change the world one cake at a time. Bye.